The Silicon Inheritance. Give back what doesn't belong to you, Eliza, shouted my stepmother Vivian, her voice echoing through the expansive hall of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. You stole my daughter's inheritance. The sleek minimalist lighting seemed to dim as every face in the gala turned to stare at me. My heart pounded wildly in my chest as I froze in place, the champagne flute nearly slipping from my trembling fingers. My name is Eliza Chen. I'm 31, a software engineer turned reluctant CEO of my father's tech empire. Just an hour ago, I'd walked into the museum's fundraising gala, genuinely hoping to mend fences. It had been a year since Dad's death, and the tension between us had become unbearable. When the invitation arrived last week, I thought Vivian was finally ready to move forward. How wrong I was. This wasn't an olive branch. It was an ambush. That company should have belonged to Madison, Vivian continued, advancing through the crowd. Your father built Quantum Core for his children, not for some charity case who wasn't even around when he needed her. I desperately scanned the room for a friendly face among the tech executives and venture capitalists who'd been my father's colleagues and friends. These were people whose startup funding and partnerships Quantum Core depended on. People who were now witnessing this public humiliation. That's not true, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Dad's will was clear. He wanted me to have the company. He wanted his real daughter to have it, Vivian interrupted. Not his charitable project. A coder who barely visited him. Tears welled in my eyes. Her words hit their mark. I had been traveling, building my own startup in Boston. I hadn't been home as often as I should have. The guilt haunted me daily, but hearing it thrown in my face publicly was devastating. Standing behind Vivian was my stepsister Madison, wearing a smug smile. She'd never shown interest in the business while Dad was alive, but now she nodded in agreement with every word her mother said. She's right, murmured someone at a nearby table. I always thought it was strange how she suddenly appeared when Michael got sick, added another voice. The room seemed to dissolve around me as more voices joined in. Within minutes, whispers had transformed into a wave of open hostility. I think you should leave, said Vivian, her voice now calm with the confidence of someone who knows they've won. Nobody wants a thief at this gala. As I walked toward the exit, my legs shaking beneath me, one thought crystallized in my mind. I would not let this happen. Not tonight, not ever. I made it to my Tesla before the tears finally flowed freely. Sitting in the darkness of the parking garage, I gripped the steering wheel as sobs racked my body. These weren't just random strangers. This was Silicon Valley's elite, the same people my father had built relationships with over 40 years, the same network I needed to keep Quantum Core alive in an increasingly competitive market. My father, Michael Chen, had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but his coding skills and a dream. He'd built Quantum Core from a garage startup into a cybersecurity powerhouse. At 48, he married Vivian, bringing her and her 12-year-old daughter Madison into our lives after my mother's death from cancer. While Dad was alive, Vivian played the role of the supportive wife, but everything changed after he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. I remember sitting by his hospital bed while he held my hand. Eliza, he said then, his voice weak but determined. You have the business instinct that Madison doesn't. She's a smart girl, but she doesn't care about Quantum Core. But you do. I've seen how you analyze everything, how you understand what makes things work. He squeezed my hand. I'm leaving the company to you, and I need you to promise you'll take care of it. I'd walked away from my own startup to fulfill that promise. At first, when the will was read, Vivian and Madison seemed to accept his decision, but within weeks, the undermining began. Subtle at first, then increasingly blatant. Tonight was simply the public culmination of a year-long campaign to discredit me. Wiping away tears, I saw a notification from Warren Liu, Dad's longtime attorney and the executor of his will. Just heard what happened. Are you okay? Call me. I immediately dialed his number, my voice still shaking as I recounted the evening's events. This is unacceptable, said Warren. Vivian knows perfectly well that your father was of sound mind when he drafted his will. We have video recording of him explaining his decisions. She's contested the will 3 times and lost every appeal. They all believe her, Warren, I whispered. Everyone in that room thinks I'm some manipulative thief. There was a pause. Do you have your laptop in your car? He asked, abruptly changing the subject. Yes, I answered, puzzled by the sudden shift. Good. Meet me at my office in 30 minutes. If Vivian wants to take this public, let's give the public the full picture. Every document, every court filing, every piece of evidence your father left to protect you from exactly this scenario. Chapter 2. For the first time since fleeing the gala, I felt something more than humiliation. A spark of determination ignited in my chest. I'll be there in 20, I said, starting the engine. Warren's office lights were still on when I pulled up to the building in the Soma district. He immediately let me in, and I found him surrounded by stacks of folders and documents. I started organizing these materials right after your father's death, he explained, pointing to neatly labeled files. Michael knew Vivian might try something like this. He was always a strategist, thinking several moves ahead. As Warren pulled out files, I paced the office, feeling shame giving way to anger. I don't understand why she did this publicly, I said. She's already contested the will and lost. What is she hoping to achieve? Warren looked up, his gray eyes serious behind his glasses. Control. For Vivian, it's always been about appearances and social standing. If she can't get the company legally, she'll try to make your position untenable by turning the business community against you. She's succeeding, I muttered, remembering the hostile looks. Not for long, replied Warren, sorting documents into new piles. Your father documented multiple instances where Madison stated she wasn't interested in the business. The management courses he encouraged you to take remotely while you were building your startup, the weekend sessions you two had when you came home. He handed me a USB drive. Here's the video testimony from your father explaining his decision. He recorded it 3 months before his death specifically to prevent Vivian's attempts to challenge his competency. I clutched the drive, remembering that day. Dad had been so weak, but his mind remained sharp as a tack. Though I knew about this recording, I hadn't had the heart to watch it since his death. There's more, continued Warren. Financial reports showing how you've increased company profits by 22% since taking over. Testimonials from employees about how you prevented layoffs when the Google contract fell through. Board meeting minutes where you offered Madison a directorship that she declined because it involved too much boring paperwork. A plan began forming in my mind. Warren, is your color printer still lightning fast? He smiled, beginning to understand. Indeed it is, and I have plenty of folders. The next hour we worked side by side. Warren printed copies of court rulings and employee letters while I organized them into presentation folders, one for each table at the gala. As we worked, Warren contacted 3 of his colleagues who agreed to meet us at the museum. These respected attorneys would add extra weight to our presentation. This isn't just about clearing your name tonight, said Warren as we finished. It's about permanently cementing your position. After this, Vivian won't be able to undermine your authority again. I glanced at my watch, barely 10:30 p.m. The gala would still be in full swing. You know, I said, loading folders into Warren's Range Rover. Dad always told me that in business, you respond to doubt with such overwhelming evidence that your opponent regrets ever questioning you. Warren smiled. He'd be proud of you today. I took a deep breath. Let's go. The drive back to the museum passed in silence. I felt the tension filling the car as Warren navigated through the evening traffic of downtown San Francisco. The folders sat between us on the seat, each containing what felt like my entire life. My father's wishes, my hard work, my legitimacy. Remember, said Warren as we pulled into the parking structure, tonight you're not just Michael Chen's daughter. You're the CEO of Quantum Core. We unloaded the Range Rover. Warren's 3 colleagues joined us at the entrance, for attorneys in impeccable suits creating a powerful visual effect, like a legal fortress around me. The same doorman who had seen me fleeing in tears now stepped back with wide eyes. My heart pounded as we approached the doors of the exhibition hall. Inside, the gala seemed to be continuing as if nothing had happened. Crystal glasses clinked, expensive perfume filled the air, and a jazz quartet played in the corner. The second I crossed the threshold, however, silence descended on the nearest tables. The silence spread like a wave. Heads turning, conversations dying. Vivian stood near the dessert display with a champagne flute in her hand, looking triumphant. When she spotted me, the smile vanished. Madison beside her gripped her mother's arm, urgently whispering something. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Warren, his authoritative voice carrying across the hall. "Pardon the interruption. My name is Warren Liu, longtime legal counsel to Michael Chen and executor of his will. I believe there has been some misunderstanding regarding Quantum Core that requires clarification." The quartet stopped playing. Every eye in the room was fixed on us. Earlier this evening, serious allegations were made against Eliza Chen, the lawful CEO of Quantum Core, Warren continued. As officers of the court, my colleagues and I are here to present the legal and factual information. Chapter 3. My legs trembled slightly as we moved forward. The attorneys began distributing folders to each table while I walked directly to the small stage where the quartet sat. One of the musicians handed me a microphone. 2 hours ago, I was accused of stealing my father's company. I began, my voice sounding more confident than I expected. I was called a thief and a manipulator. I was booed and humiliated in front of all of you. I paused, surveying the room. Some guests lowered their eyes, unable to meet my gaze. Others looked puzzled as they opened the folders with furrowed brows. My stepmother, Vivian Chen, orchestrated that scene. What she didn't tell you is that she has contested my father's will 3 times and lost each appeal. I nodded to Warren, who projected the court decisions onto the screen behind me. Vivian started toward me, but 2 of Warren's colleagues smoothly moved to block her path. "Before you hear from me," I continued, "I'd like you to hear from my father." Warren connected the USB drive to the sound system. The screen flickered and my father appeared, gaunt but clear-eyed, sitting in his home office. The room plunged into complete silence as his image appeared on screen. Despite his illness, he sat straight in his leather chair, his once robust frame now emaciated, but his eyes still gleaming with intelligence. Several people gasped. Some hadn't seen how wasted he'd become in his final months. "My name is Michael Chen," he began, his voice raspy but firm. "I am recording this statement on March 15th, in the presence of my attorney Warren Liu and Dr. Catherine Patel, who has certified my mental competence." The camera panned briefly to show both professionals before returning to my father. "I am the founder and CEO of Quantum Core. After careful consideration and planning, I have decided to leave controlling interest in the company to my daughter, Eliza Chen." Dad shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "I want to explain why I've made this decision, as I anticipate it may cause conflict after I'm gone." His gaze seemed to stare directly at Vivian, though he couldn't have known she would be watching this recording at her birthday gala a year later. "Eliza has demonstrated both the business acumen and passion necessary to lead Quantum Core. Despite her career as a software engineer building her own startup, she has spent years studying the business, analyzing our operations, and understanding our industry. She completed business courses at my suggestion and has shown remarkable abilities in strategic planning." The video switched to footage of me at the company with Dad, reviewing blueprints, meeting with clients, moments I didn't even know had been recorded. My daughter Madison has been offered various opportunities to participate in the company over the years, but has consistently declined. When directly asked, she stated, and I quote, "I'm not interested in spending my life making boring security software." The video showed Madison at a family dinner rolling her eyes and saying those exact words, then her rejection of a management training position during a recorded meeting in Dad's office. "I love both my daughters," Dad continued, "but a business should be run by someone who loves it. Eliza has that love." Dr. Patel appeared on screen, confirming Dad's mental competence, with her credentials listed under her name. The video ended with Dad looking directly into the camera. "I trust Eliza to protect my legacy and the livelihoods of everyone at Quantum Core." As the screen went dark, I surveyed the room. Many guests were now reviewing the folders, expressions of shock and dismay replacing their earlier judgment. "Since taking over," I said into the microphone, "revenues are up 22%. We've expanded into 2 new markets, added 17 jobs, and avoided layoffs despite losing the Google contract." I nodded to Warren, who displayed financial charts on the screen. On page 12 of your folders, you'll find letters from our employees, many of whom worked for my father for decades, expressing their support for my leadership. I took a deep breath before continuing. Page 15 contains an official job offer made to Madison 3 months ago for a directorship with minimal operational responsibility. She declined via email, stating she had better things to do than spend time at a tech company that builds boring security software. I could see Madison's face reddening as several guests turned to look at her. The final section, I said, my voice growing stronger, contains court decisions rejecting Vivian's challenges to the will, with expert testimony confirming my father was fully competent when making his decision. I stepped forward, momentarily lowering the microphone as I looked directly at Vivian, who stood frozen by the dessert display. You asked me to return what doesn't belong to me, I said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. But as these documents prove beyond any doubt, Quantum Core is exactly where Dad wanted it to be. I picked up the microphone again, turning to address the entire room. I understand that many of you were misled tonight. You heard one side of a complex story and reacted based on incomplete information. I paused, allowing my gaze to sweep the entire hall. I don't blame you, but I do ask that you take time to review the evidence before making further judgments. The atmosphere in the room transformed. Hostility disappeared, replaced by awkwardness and embarrassment. Jack Torres, CEO of our largest client, stood from his table. Eliza, I owe you an apology, he said, his voice carrying across the room. I should have known better than to accept such serious allegations without question. His public acknowledgement seemed to break a dam. Other guests began looking more closely at the folders. Whispers of page 3 shows. And look at these growth figures. Gradually arising. Warren's colleagues stood nearby, answering questions as they emerged. Vivian finally broke through the attorney's blockade, storming toward me with Madison trailing behind. How dare you, she hissed, her voice low but venomous. This is my birthday celebration, and you've turned it into a corporate presentation. This is precisely why Michael should never have left you the company, she continued, louder now. You have no class, no sense of decorum. I smiled calmly, knowing every eye in the room was on us. Interesting perspective from someone who used her own birthday celebration to publicly accuse me of theft and have me thrown out. You manipulated him. Vivian's voice trembled with anger. You were barely even there. Warren stepped forward, tablet in hand. Actually, hospital and hospice visitation logs show Eliza visited her father 83 times in the last 6 months. According to the same records, Madison, you visited him 12 times. Mrs. Chen, you visited him 37 times. Madison's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The company was supposed to secure our future, Vivian finally said, dropping all pretense. Michael promised me we would always be taken care of. And you are, I firmly replied. Dads will generously provide it for you both. The trust he established ensure you'll never have financial concerns. I lowered my voice so only they could hear. What he didn't do was give you control over his life's work, because he knew what would happen if he did. Vivian's face contorted with rage. For a moment, I thought she might strike me. Instead, she grabbed Madison's arm and dragged her toward the exit. This isn't over, she threw over her shoulder. Actually it is, Warren called after her. Any further legal claims will be treated as frivolous litigation and we will seek sanctions. After they were gone, the tension in the room noticeably eased. Guests began approaching me, offering apologies and congratulations on the company's success. Some admitted they had always found Vivian's version suspicious, but hadn't felt comfortable speaking up. Edward Martinez, the former CFO who had worked with my father for 20 years before retiring, came up to me. Michael was right about you, he said, shaking my hand. You've got his backbone. He used to say you had your mother's talent, but his business instinct. Tears welled in my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of humiliation. Thank you, Edward. That means everything to me. The evening continued, and I found myself surrounded by support instead of contempt. Warren stood nearby, satisfaction evident in his smile as his colleagues began collecting the folders. They had served their purpose. What now? asked Warren as the gala gradually returned to its normal flow. I surveyed the room full of tech leaders, many of whom would be crucial to Quantum Core's future. Now, I said, straining my shoulders, we build Quantum Core into exactly what Dad always knew it could be. Chapter 4. 6 months have passed since Vivian's catastrophic birthday gala. That evening became a turning point, not just in how the business community perceived me, but in how I perceived myself. Walking back into that ballroom with evidence and truth transformed me. Quantum Core has thrived even more than I could have predicted in my most optimistic projections. After the gala, several guests approached me with new business opportunities. Jack Torres's company doubled their contracts with us, and we've since hired 28 new employees and expanded to a second office in Austin. The aftermath for Vivian and Madison proved not what anyone expected. 2 weeks after the gala, Madison unexpectedly appeared in my office. She sat across from me, nervously fidgeting with her designer bracelet. Mom spent most of her personal savings on those lawsuits, she said bluntly. And my trust fund from Dad doesn't fully mature for another 3 years. I studied my stepsister's face, looking for deception but finding only desperation. Why come to me, especially after everything that happened? Because, she admitted reluctantly, you're the only one who's actually succeeding. Everyone else in Mom's social circle is just pretending. I offered Madison an entry-level position in our marketing department. To my surprise, she accepted, and even more surprisingly, she's shown genuine aptitude for the work. We're not friends and perhaps never will be, but a professional respect is growing between us. Vivian, humiliated after the gala, sold the San Francisco house and moved to Los Angeles. Rumors suggest she's hunting for a new wealthy widower. Our paths haven't crossed since, and I doubt they will anytime soon. My personal life has undergone no less significant transformations. For years, coding was my identity. My computer, my constant companion through the childhood loneliness after Mom died, through the awkward family merger when Dad married Vivian, through the grueling schedule of MIT and my startup. When Dad got sick and I stepped away from my company, I thought I was taking just a temporary break. But leading Quantum Core awakened something unexpected in me. The challenge of leadership, the satisfaction of creating jobs, and solving problems. These things fulfill me in ways I never anticipated. I still code, usually late at night when the day's work is done. But my relationship with technology has evolved into something more personal and less performance-oriented. Last month, I did something Dad would have approved of. I established the Michael Chen Foundation, dedicated to bringing STEM education to underserved schools throughout the Bay Area. The foundation also provides business mentorship to young entrepreneurs, merging both sides of my life into something meaningful. At our launch event, I publicly performed for the first time since taking over as CEO. Not playing piano like in the original story, but giving a live coding demonstration on the same stage where my father had given his legendary TechCrunch presentation 15 years ago, creating algorithms surrounded by the technology he built. Among employees whose livelihoods he secured and whom I now protected, I felt his presence more strongly than at any time since his death. I realized that inheritance isn't just about assets and property. It's about carrying forward the best parts of those we've lost while adding our unique contribution. The business community that once booed me now points to Quantum Core as a model of innovation and ethical leadership. The company is thriving. Madison is finding her way, and I've discovered a new harmony between the coder I was and the businesswoman I've become. Dad was right all along. Some inheritances aren't stolen, they're earned. The end. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content.